Well, the Liberal government has rolled out its plan to beef up the Canadian Armed Forces.
Today, we set a new course. Reversing a pattern of decline, this new policy will see annual cash funding for defence increase by more than 70% in 10 years.
In addition to that 70% increase, the new defence policy includes the addition of roughly 5,000 uniformed troops. This all comes just a day after Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland told Parliament that Canada cannot, quote, rely solely on the U.S. security umbrella anymore. And joining us this morning is the Minister of National Defence, Harjit Sajjan. Good morning to you. Minister, can you hear us here in Toronto?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, well, good morning to you.
Can you hear me?
I can. My first question to you is, it's a lot of big numbers. We've got $60 billion on ships, $15 billion on jets. As a Canadian, I'm happy to see increased spending in our military, but as a taxpayer, I'm just wondering, how are you going to pay for it?
First of all, I think it's very important to note that this defense policy, the main focus is our men and women in uniform. I understand, we do end up talking about a lot of the bigger capital projects, but this defense policy, and it starts right from the first chapter, is focused on our people. Our government committed to making sure that we're going to be looking after our men and women in uniform, also their families, and that's where a lot of the priority funding is going to go. For example, from the tax-free exemption for international operations, the military family resource centers, making sure that no one is released until all their benefits, Veterans Affairs benefits, their pension checks are in place. So and the equipment that we talk about, that also goes to taking care of our troops as well. So that's what this policy does, and that's what our government's commitment is to our men and women in uniform.
Nobody can argue with your sense of commitment, given the amount of gear we're planning to purchase and what you're planning to do for veterans' families, but I still don't know how you're going to pay for it.
No, as the Minister of Finance stated in the previous budget, our government's commitment to the Canadian Armed Forces will come out in their defence policy. So the defence policy, we worked very closely with the Minister of Finance, with him, to making sure that he looked at the long-term fiscal framework and the money was accounted for. This is why we spent a lot of time going through a very rigorous costing process to making sure that we got the number right. We had third-party reviews done for it, and then we as a government approved, and now this defense policy is fully funded for the next 20 years.
The Canadian military has had sort of a needs and wants list for a really long time. And, I know that you went through and you assigned the dollars and cents. Was there anything you weren't able to accomplish?
No, my main focus was to making sure our men and women are looked after. Like for any Canadians who goes to work, it's important that their families are looked after, that their future for their children is going to be looked after. Given the fact that our men and women, forget about just operations, how difficult that is when you leave your family, but also the training that you have to do, the constant moving. So we wanted to make sure that we created an environment for them that's positive, that's inclusive, that we're going to be reaching out and increasing diversity. That's what we focused on. And then we focused on the equipment. We have in this policy everything that we need, and we're going to be executing this plan. And then now the military is looking forward to creating a plan for the next 20 years that's going to look after our troops, and more importantly, because they look after Canadian interests.
The military has been asking for new gear for a really long time, and they've heard promises before, only to see, those promises revoked. What guarantees can you give that that's not going to happen here?
Well, one, I too heard promises before I got into politics when it came to the military. This is one of the reasons we did go through a very rigorous costing process. Why the numbers are so high? Because that's what it costs to run a military, to making sure that we look after our men and women in uniform. But one thing we did was, that's why in the defense policy, you'll see we do lay out the plan for the fiscal framework and how the defense spending is going to increase, to making sure that all the money is going to be there. By putting that out there, now the Canadian public can hold our government and any future government to account, to making sure that the money is going to be there.
To Canadians who were listening closely during the last federal election campaign, we heard a lot about the Liberal government promoting diplomacy. And then with the new administration coming in the U.S., again, we really hyped up our global image as people who put diplomacy first. But the numbers that came out in this policy yesterday show that 70% increase in military spending. That seems to be a really hard right turn. So is this about as much about protecting Canadians as it is protecting our Canadian global reputation when it comes to areas like NATO?
No, I definitely don't look at it that way at all. The 70% increase in our budget in the next 10 years, 70% increase in our defense spending, this is about making sure that the Canadian Armed Forces are looked after, whether it's our government, any future governments, what we ask of them. That's what's required to have a military like ours. But our government has put a very big priority on making sure that we have a full, comprehensive whole-of-government approach. For example, when we launched our mission, increased our mission in Iraq, it was a whole-of-government. We looked at the military, the diplomacy, the capacity building, and development as well. And any future missions, we will also do that. In fact, now the United Nations is also taking this on board, calling it an integrated approach. Military is only one tool to solving our problems around the world. Yes, there's a direct threat, but military buys you time, but the diplomacy and the development is absolutely crucial. We also need to be able to work with our international partners as well. So our government is putting a very high priority on making sure that we synchronize all the assets, and diplomacy leads on a lot of fronts. And if we don't, we're not going to be able to reduce some of the conflicts that we see in the world.
Minister, you mentioned you're a military man. First and foremost, are these numbers numbers that the military can rely on? Can they build budgets? Can they build teams and build strategies around the numbers that you've promised?
Absolutely. This will now provide that sustainable and predictable funding so that the military can do the long-term planning that it requires, to making sure that we have enough people that's going to write enough the pension checks. I mean, we had our members who were waiting sometimes years for a pension check, and that's unacceptable. We had members who weren't looked after, their mental health and physical health. So what we're going to be focusing on is preventative physical and mental health. So making sure that we create the environment for our men and women, making sure that their families are looked after. Yes, the ships, the planes, and all the armored vehicles are important, and we're going to deliver on that too. But this is going to make sure that we have a diverse Canadian Armed Forces that's well looked after, well equipped, and when we send them off in the world, they're not going to be sent off alone. They're going to be sent off with the right support from development and also the capacity building resources that comes with it from diplomacy.
Minister, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us, answer our questions this morning.
Great. Thank you for having me.